I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo and Bowling Green, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMar, and I'm here with my incredible co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are about to craft our 300th episode of For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, and happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your co-workers, and the worms in the ground and the birds that eat the worms and the cats that eat the birds, and pretty much everybody and everything, because, like it or not, we are all together on this wonderful planet called Earth. And for 300 episodes, we've been trying to figure out how to navigate that planet without actually wrecking it, and with mixed success. So
We seem to be kind of sliding backwards there, but never mind, go on.
okay, going on. So we've got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to chat for another 10 minutes or so here, and feel free to call in and let us know what you think of the last 1,500 or 300 episodes. And you can call it 877-909-1007, and maybe give us a congratulations, or maybe give us a raspberry. I don't know, whatever moves you. Then we're going to talk with, this is also our pre-Thanksgiving episode. And so those who listen to the show for these past 5 years or so know that every Thanksgiving we have a nice chat with Philip Yenyo, who's head of the American Indian Movement of Ohio, about sort of Native American views on Thanksgiving and thankfulness and traditions and gratitude and so forth. Then we will hear from our wonderful patrons, and then it's Rebecca. And Rebecca, what will you be talking about this week?
I will be talking about the Bay of Haifa.
Bay of Haifa. Okay, sounds interesting. And after that, there's ecological news. And hopefully, like I said, at some point during the show, we'll hear from you, because we're happy to drop everything and talk to our listeners. So this is our 300th episode, but as those of you who were listening last week know, our 299th episode, I talked about how my weather app on my phone was predicting that there wouldn't be any more freezing weather from then all the way through to the end of November. And of course, we did have some freezing weather this past week, so my app was wrong. But I just want to remind everybody that, once again, 1 or 2 cold days does not mean global warming isn't happening. You know, it obviously is. And
Are you trying to say the world does not revolve around me personally, Joe? when I'm cold, it's not an international emergency? It's just that I need to put a sweater on?
far be it for me to
You
try to
wouldn't say
disabuse
things
you
like
of that
that.
notion,
No,
Rebecca.
no.
But I just wanted to remind our listeners that, 1 or 2 cold days doesn't mean doesn't reverse decades of science. So, but I also wanted to talk about experience I had yesterday, very fun experience in Bowling Green. Bowling Green had its annual holiday parade yesterday, which some of you might have actually caught. It was covered on TV on, I believe it was on Channel 13 locally in Toledo. And it was a great experience. I was in the parade with the Wood County Green Party. Regular listeners know I'm a Green Party guy. And our float, our entry into the parade was we had a giant earth ball, which was really cool. It's a 7-foot diameter globe. And what it has on it is NASA satellite photos of the entire Earth minus clouds. So you can literally see every tiny little island in the Pacific Ocean. And it's just this, and of course it was real colors, the land was, and there were no international boundary lines anywhere, of course, because it showed how the Earth really looks from space. And I just wanted to share the reaction of the crowd to that gigantic earth ball rolling towards them, and everybody loved it.
Great.
It doesn't matter what political party you are, how old you are. I mean, even the toddlers, even the 1 and 2 year olds, was like, wow, look at that big thing.
It's a giant ball. What could be bad?
Right, and especially because the way this one is built, it's kind of like a giant beach ball. It's like huge, but it's
Right.
also light. So our giant earth ball roller guy was like rolling it into the crowds, and the crowds would push it back into the road.
Oh, that sounds fun.
It was a ton of fun, and that joy, that absolute joy, just something really cool and beautiful, is an important part of continuing to fight for the environment. Because when you're in this environmental movement, there's a lot of disappointments because the bad guys win a lot. And so it's very easy to get a low morale. But morale is really essential for continuing to fight. I mean,
True.
generals know this. They know this in the military, that if your morale is low, you're not going to perform as well. So rolling this giant earth ball down Main Street in Bowling Green was an incredible morale boost, because thousands and thousands of people were watching us and cheering and saying, "Yay, save the Earth!" And it was just a great experience, a really intense boost to morale, and a reminder that nobody wants to destroy the environment. Literally everybody loves the Earth. And nobody's saying, we got to go wreck the environment. Let's go destroy stuff. Even the people that are pushing policies that will destroy the environment have it somehow in their heads that, oh, this won't really destroy the environment.
Yeah.
This is just something we're going to do. And, the Earth can handle it. Or I heard one person say, oh, you can't have air pollution because the air is strong.
No.
Yeah,
Air is
no.
not
No,
strong. It's
right.
not weak. It's just air.
Exactly. Yeah. But even that person cared enough about the environment to have to come up with a rationale
Yeah.
to justify, not having air pollution regulations. And, so even in people like that love of the Earth is there. And so it was just nice to see that kind of, that kind of an experience there. And it was great. So I'm very happy. So I'm high morale today, even though I'm low energy, because I had to get up at 5 in the morning. Because we also had in our little part, we had the Wonder Van, the plug-in hybrid Wonder Van, in order to promote EVs. So at 5 in the morning yesterday, I was washing my car, in case anyone's wondering. But one thing that also came through yesterday, or that kind of I made a connection with yesterday. This is also our Thanksgiving episode, in the 300th episode and our Thanksgiving episode. And that kind of love and joy and celebration should go hand in hand with gratitude, if you know what I mean. We should be thankful that, we're in a society that can have big fun things like parades. And so I thought every year we talk to our friend Philip Yenyo about gratitude. So let's He's on the line. Let's go to that call now. Hey, Philip, are you there?
Yep, I am here.
Excellent. Well, happy to hear from you again.
Yeah, it's good to be heard from.
Yeah. So, as we do every year, we like to talk with you about Thanksgiving and the sort of the role of gratitude in Native culture, because that the cultures that were here on North America before us Europeans arrived and started like messing everything up. The culture that was here, that idea of gratitude was kind of universal in indigenous American culture. Wouldn't you say? Is that a stretch, or do you think that's accurate?
Oh, no, that's not a stretch. That's absolutely accurate. At the time, survival was hard. And it was the same thing in Europe. Survival was hard. So we always remained grateful for the gifts that Great Spirit gave us to help sustain our lives. It wasn't just a one-day event. It was a way of life and a daily occurrence. To be gifted with the ability to wake up in the morning and experience the things that the Great Spirit put here for us to enjoy and for us to help us get through our lives. The people in our lives, being grateful for the people in our lives also, not just the food sources and that it's everything.
Mm-hmm. And but there were gratitude. I remember. I've read speeches by indigenous leaders that like sort of started out with gratitude, like before they even got into the business of whatever they were trying to decide. They would get up and say, well, first, let's say thank you for water, for example. And
that gratitude and thankfulness starts, when the sun comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional peoples would wake up and they would greet the day.
Mm-hmm.
Thank Great Spirit for another day to walk upon Mother Earth. It was ingrained. It was a way of living, not just being mindful of the things around us that help us through our lives. So,
mm-hmm. Now, you've kind of got something to be grateful for the past couple of years, because you were, we could talk about this since this is a sports station most of the time. You fought for a long time to get the Cleveland Indians renamed over to the Cleveland Guardians. And
me personally, almost 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the 90s.
Grateful.
People were doing that.
Yeah, it was actually people don't realize that those demonstrations were going on since the 60s.
Yep.
Because it was never reported on.
You're right.
Everybody seems to think that just because they got this new baseball field that it started happening, and that was not true at all.
Nope.
There were a couple articles over that time that touched base on what was going on down there. And people don't realize that our people weren't even allowed in federal court. So when they named the team back in 1914, 1915 era, we weren't allowed to bring the case to the federal court and use what the federal trademark and trade name law specifically states, that no mark or name should be stricken from the list unless it disparages a group of people and so forth.
Uh-huh.
So, there was no way back then that we could actually bring a case or bring an argument
Because you weren't
to that situation.
because you weren't actually considered citizens then, right?
Correct. We weren't even considered citizens. Actually, that wasn't until 1924 that we were considered citizens. And the thing, too, about that is we didn't ask to be citizens. We're separate and sovereign nations according to, the treaties and according to the Constitution. The other thing people don't realize that what it states in the Constitution, everybody says, oh, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. No, it's not. Because even in that constitutional document, it specifically states that the supreme law of the land is the treaties with the native people.
Mm-hmm.
So the treaties are the supreme law of the land, not the Constitution of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And since they've all been broken and people have been raping, pillaging, and plundering the resources on this continent, they're stealing from us, basically. All these riches and resources and copper and the uranium and the oil and all that belongs to us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been gifted through the government to the oil companies and the water companies, all these other corporations.
Right.
The thing that bothers me about this election is, President Biden had protected Bears Ear and reversed what Donald Trump had done with Bears Ear National Monument. Sacred site, a lot of resources there. People don't remember that Mr. Trump was going to lease that land to the company that is owned by Australia and China to go in there and start mining copper.
Mm-hmm.
So now our fear is that he's going to reverse that, and that's going to start taking place again.
Mm-hmm. And
the same thing with the pipeline and all these other protections
of
Mother Earth that were put in place.
Would you say the pipeline? You mean the Line 5 pipeline under Lake Michigan?
The Keystone XL.
Oh, the Keystone XL pipeline. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny how people think that the president has something to do with the gas prices, because no president has anything to do with the gas prices.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand how a lot of people don't understand how that works.
Right. But I mean, in this season of gratitude, though, I mean, it is good that
in the season of gratitude, I'll tell you what. Me personally, and I was watching a video yesterday about the yin and yang from the Chinese culture, and it talks about balance.
Mm-hmm.
These things that we have in our lives that make us feel balanced or actually balance us. And I thought about it, and I thought about how it correlates to Native culture, and it's a lot of that is true also. We don't try to shy away from the bad things in our lives, because there's a lot to be learned from bad situations, bad things happening. I'm not saying that it's ordained by, Great Spirit that it happens, but we learn these lessons. So for me, last year at this time, my dad had passed away, and I had said that I was grateful that I, could be there and be present through the whole grieving process. It's now been a year. My grieving process is over, so I'm grateful for having experienced that grieving process. It's not easy losing a parent,
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for the struggles in my life,
mm-hmm.
because nobody goes through life without struggles, and people are always trying to say, well, I don't want to struggle. None of us want to struggle. but there's lessons to be learned through that struggle. This is where we get into that balance. You can't constantly have good things happen, and then when something bad happens, you're absolutely devastated. You go into depressions and all this stuff. And that's not healthy.
It's like the
It's
good book
learning how to
says.
deal with those trials and tribulations in our lives. So I'm grateful for, the people in my life, whether they side with me politically or not, whether they side with me, on the environment or not, because there's lessons to be learned there.
There's a time to every purpose
and-
under
and so-
heaven, as they say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, you learn these lessons, and maybe by learning these lessons, we're able to get our message across in a way that opens up their minds and their hearts, and they'll listen to us. You can't constantly go around beating a drum and yelling and screaming at people and think that they're gonna hear you. It was the same thing down at the stadium during the demonstrations. I liked going up to people and talking to them, being interpersonal discussions about the Chief Wahoo issue and the name of the baseball team issue. When the first thing I think of when somebody's yelling and screaming at me, I just want to cover up my ears. And when you cover up your ears, you can't hear what's being said. So, there's a demeanor and a way about educating people on certain issues, whether it be the environment, politics, or what have you. So yeah, I'm grateful for the toxic people that have found their way into my life, because there's lessons to be learned from being around people like that. You can't always, constantly stay away from toxic people, even family members.
Yeah, that's an important perspective, and I think one of the things that a lot of us have learned in the recent years is that the Thanksgiving that we celebrate, maybe when we were children, we were taught, we're all about the Pilgrims and how there was this wonderful feast of Thanksgiving, but the reality after that first one was nowhere near as positive. That Thanksgiving after that sort of became for the colonizers, for us Western folks, that it sort of became a celebration of acts of genocide against the Native American people.
Well, it's celebrating our
true, too.
survival, but that came at someone else's expense is the problem.
Correct. Well, and the sad thing is that it came at an expense when all the people were trying to do was to help them survive.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
tried to help them survive, and what thanks did they get? They got massacred. Villages upon villages got massacred. And then they would have a Thanksgiving celebration after the massacre. People don't understand. People don't know. And the funny thing is, when you tell them these things, oh, you're rewriting history. That's revisionist history. No, it's the truth, because you weren't taught the truth when you were little. You were taught this happy-go-lucky story. So people go through life, with this happy-go-lucky story, and they don't realize the atrocities that took place.
Right, but maybe
They're all over stealing land.
Yeah, but maybe I'm a little weird, maybe, because I'm always grateful for the truth, if you know what I mean. Like you say, you can't look away, you can't imagine, can't just rewrite it in your head as, oh, that didn't really happen. I'm always grateful when I learn what really happened, even if it's not as wonderful and rosy as I had thought it was. So I am grateful.
Right. And then
go ahead.
And then when you present people with facts and they say, well, that's not true. No, where'd you get that information? And you cite your, where you got the information. And, well, that's not true. No, it is. the fact of the matter is you're not accepting of truth. You're not accepting of historical fact. It was written down. This book was written in such and such year. This is what happened, and you're just choosing to ignore it or say that it's a lie or that it's alternative facts. No, there's no. It's either truth or lie. There's no in between. It's truth or lie.
Well, and
so I mean, especially when you're reading something that somebody wrote that was an eyewitness, that or was part of, these things. You can't say, people say, "Oh, this happened when Custard was killed," but you have witnesses, native witnesses that were, telling what happened, and they still want to think this guy to be some kind of hero when all he was ever was an Indian killer.
Yeah, but I do want to. we've kind of gone down the sort of we've taken a good hard look at sort of the negative stuff here, but I do want to say that I was grateful that you and I managed to get to an actual Guardians game this year. We
finally after how many rainouts?
Yeah, we were. It was like our fourth or fifth try to finally get to one. Now that they've renamed it Guardians, I feel very comfortable.
And we were very excited in our household because, like, a couple of weeks ago, actually, my roommate finally, after a lot of pain and hundreds of dollars, got her Chief Wahoo tattoo covered.
Oh, wow.
That she had like 20 years ago. Yeah. He's gone.
Wow.
He's behind a big old cluster of dark green leaves now. Bye-bye.
I didn't
Oh,
know that.
wow.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So,
and I'm absolutely grateful for the opportunity to go there and enjoy a baseball game with you. It was amazing. It was really, really cool.
yeah, and they had a really good year too. I don't think personally, somehow, I don't think that's a coincidence. So, yeah.
Probably not.
So, all right. Well,
I think next year they're going to do even better. I look forward to seeing them in the World Series and winning under the banner of the Guardians.
that would be amazing. So, all right. Well, cool. Well, we're just about out of time, Philip. But is there anything more you'd like to say to our listeners here before we?
I think we pretty much covered it today. So I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy the food, enjoy your family, and feel blessed.
Yes, and I'm grateful that we've got this tradition going on our show here and I thought it's very appropriate that this was our 300th episode and we're talking about Thanksgiving. So, all right. Well, thanks so much, Philip, and we'll talk to you next year, if not sooner.
Yes, we'll see what happens.
There we go.
Okay, should be an interesting year. All right, that was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, that was Philip Yenyo of the American Indian Movement of Ohio, and I just want to say real quick, one thing I wanted to talk about this Thanksgiving is one thing that has kind of improved in our relations with the indigenous people is we now have these acknowledgments that where people talk about which tribe's land they're on before they talk about stuff, and and I think indigenous people have much more authority in our culture than they used to. I mean, I'm 62, so I remember back in the early 70s and things when Native Americans, their opinions didn't count at all. People just discounted them. They weren't included in stuff because people didn't feel they were somehow even as good as European descended people. So we have come a long ways, and I am grateful for that. So, and we are also grateful for our advertisers and patrons. Four Green Future is brought to you by our patrons. And these are fantastic people for whom we are eternally grateful, who've gone to our Patreon page. That's Patreon, and then search for A Green Future, and you'll see our Patreon page there, and up pops a whole different panoply of membership levels that you can pick that match your budget. Our patrons have picked one, and every month a little bit comes out of their accounts and comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to bring you For a Green Future. And also want to make a pitch for if you have a business that you would like to target, people who, for example, have an interest in nature. Maybe you sell bird seed, or maybe you're trying to sell electric cars or something along those lines. You should advertise on For a Green Future, because we're talking to the people that you need to reach. All right, that's it for advertisers and patrons. And now, Rebecca, let's take a little trip.
Okie dokie. Well, I'm calling this little segment Baha'i by the Bay because it sounds, I don't know, it's got a ring to it. Anyway, so this coming week are two major Baha'i holidays, which is a vaguely monotheistic religion with some Middle Eastern roots that people all over the world subscribe to.
Okay.
So let's see. First, I think on Monday it's the Day of the Covenant, in which the original manifestation of God, or he's not called a prophet in Baha'i. This is one thing I learned. Named his son the successor, who people should look to for guidance after his death. And then there's also on the 27th Wednesday is the ascension of Abdul Baha. Baha? Yeah, Abdul Baha, I think, who I think that was the son, but I'm not sure. And because the sign is in Acre, aka Akko, in Israel, Israel Palestine, I thought that I'd do something about the Haifa Bay, because it's located right on the Haifa Bay. You got like a big natural C-shaped bay. And on the northern end of it is Acre, and on the southern end of it is Haifa, which Haifa seems to have got all the development, for better or worse. It's a major center for petrochemicals and chemical refinery and all that. It seems like Acre is a little more scenic, but I'm sure they both have things.
Uh-huh.
I like urban things and scenic things myself, and some that are both. So, but yeah, Haifa Bay is on a coastal plain in West Galilee, also called the Bay of Acre. Well, that's kind of an older name. It used to be called the Bay of Acre, also called Bay of Akko. That's an older name, I guess. I don't know. Israel's only natural harbor on the Mediterranean, and it's fed by the Kishon River. Acre's on the North Cape of the bay. It has two little horn protrusions of capes coming out on either end. So it looks kind of cool, like almost like a what do you call those? A ray. It looks almost like a ray to me somehow.
Like a manta ray?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's the plain is called the Zevulun Valley of Zevulun, I believe, and it's the home of Haifa. It was once the home of the Phoenician glass factory. There's like this huge oil refinery in Haifa that processing tower that towers over Haifa that is no longer functional, but it's just become an emblem of the city, so they still have it there. So that's a kind of Rust Belt pride there. I can relate. I'm from Muskegon. It was something called the Phoenician Glass Factory used to be there, but it got moved. It was there for a while. So it was one of their private industries, just like Toledo. That's where the major developed port is in Haifa. But there are a lot of beaches. There's 5 or 6 major beaches that I can tell. They have a reputation for being clean, at least visually, as far as I can tell. They're nice. Bat Galim, I think it is the most popular. Interestingly, there's been a study because Zevulun Plain has in the past been swallowed up by the Mediterranean Sea and kind of spat back out numerous times over the millennia. So that might be happening again someday. It won't be good for the port. So some environmental issues having to do with this port would be that, of course, obviously there's serious industrial pollution. It's not good at all. And there's a microclimate that prevents the pollutants from dispersal.
Ooh.
Crude oil storage is near the port for some reason, and the port tends to trap contaminated sediments and then release them during flooding. It looks as if, I'm not sure I understand it completely, but it looks as if, I mean, you've got your wind coming down off the mountains. They sort of block any winds coming that could blow the stuff out to sea. And then sort of the winds and the waves come off the water and kind of just trap everything in the bay or in the rivers. And then, periodically it just sort of vomits out a bunch of it. According to, officially there are no nuclear plants in Israel. Maybe there are actually no nuke plants in Israel. Reuters said they were considering it, quote, in 2010, and had been considering it for a while. They have a weapons-producing ore plant, and Dimona, an experimental reactor. And they for a while have been planning for a nuke plant in the Negev desert. I don't know whether that ever happened or not. It may not have. This microclimate thing is affected by wind patterns, topography, industrial activities. Basically it's all just kind of trapped there. Apparently, the Kishon River has sewage and agricultural runoff. Children raised in the Bay Area have higher rates of many cancers.
Oh.
And there was a little thing called the ICL Rotem disaster, 2019 to 2021, when a phosphate mining company just crapped up a tributary of the Kishon, like a little creek that runs into the Kishon. So I did a little research because it's about Baha'i, According to what I saw, the Baha'i faith believes that nature is an expression of God's will and an embodiment of God's name as the creator. So creator and creation are sort of mystically linked, and it should be cherished and protected. And there should be compassion for all living things, and seeing the reflection of God's attributes in nature should inspire respect for the natural world. So
All
I
right.
talked to my buddy. He's a local filmmaker, Michael Cullen, I believe, and a cultural commentator. He says, the Shrine of the Bab is the one that's on Mount Carmel in Haifa. He was a forerunner to Baha'u'llah, which I guess is the his name is also called Abdul, the servant of Baha'i. Is the son's name too, I guess. Abdul means servant. And we refer to them as manifestations of God as opposed to prophets. There's like the mansion of Bahi that's there, the mansion of delight, also called Summer House, and it's the house where Baha'i, the founder of the Baha'i faith, died. He was buried in an adjacent house, which became the shrine. And it's the Baha'i Qibla, which I had to look up. That's where you face to pray, the Qibla. And the whole area is called a place of delight. There's some kind of a garden that's nearby, too. So it sounds really nice, actually.
All right. Okay, an interesting look at a place that you don't often think about.
True.
But,
I never had before.
apparently like a smoggy kind of place, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of like Los Angeles,
Yeah.
only without the movie stars.
Okay, well, thanks, Rebecca, for that. And so now it's time to go on to ecological news. And we're going to start in Brazil because Biden was there this past week. He went there and became the first president to visit the Brazilian rainforest. You might have seen that on the mainstream news. But part of what did not get reported on the mainstream news was that he signed an executive order on the 17th of November, creating something called International Conservation Day. So we've got another holiday.
Right.
Yay! And conservation is a good thing to celebrate. So it's kind of interesting that nobody reported on the fact that Biden did this. He did a bunch of other stuff while he was there in Brazil, including a bilateral agreement with Brazil to encourage Brazil to install more wind, solar panels, and batteries, ideally manufactured by U.S. companies. And so it's kind of the U.S. trying to. China right now completely dominates the wind and battery markets, the solar and battery markets, and it's attempting to completely dominate the wind market just like that, which has been a tremendous economic loss to the United States to be completely shut out of one of the fastest growing industrial sectors in the world economy, partly because we've been focusing on nukes, which nobody wants and takes forever to build. But so Biden signed a bilateral agreement with Lula, which is interesting because Lula is sort of this leftist kind of guy. So it was interesting that Biden went there and hung out with him. Brazil has a long history of biofuels. They have grown sugarcane, and a large percentage of their fuel for automobiles and stuff is made there locally. In this bilateral agreement, biofuels are mentioned, but there is no mention of nukes in that bilateral agreement, and that's good. And there are also, Lula has created this thing in Brazil called the Tropical Forests Forever Facility, which is basically, it's an international organization, and the purpose of it is to save rainforest all over the planet and to basically make rainforests completely off limits to development, to essentially protect rainforests forever.
Sounds like a good idea.
Because they're, absolutely essential for all our survival. So the more you pave over them, the more you turn them into farmland, the worse off everybody is. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that we now have a new holiday, International Conservation Day. So mark your calendar for next year. Okay, next story. And this one, it was in Grist. And the story actually was way back in August 26th, but I think it's important enough to go back and cover it. And the title was Thawing Alaska Permafrost is Unleashing More Mercury, Confirming Scientists' Worst Fears.
Oh, dear.
That's never good when you confirm a worst fear of a scientist.
No, because they have a big imagination to the positive and the negative.
Yes. And so this was a study done on the Yukon River by the University of South California. And essentially it found that as the permafrost melts, it's releasing tons and tons of mercury. And mercury is a horrible toxin. It affects the neurological system. It basically destroys your brain. And there's an image that I saw growing up that actually hasn't been seen, enough lately. It's called Tomoko and Mother in the Bath. And it showed this poor gal who had, in Japan in the 70s, had no regulation on mercury. And so a lot of industries just dumped mercury directly into the ocean. And so the levels in the fish were getting astronomical. And so people who ate a lot of fish their brains were getting messed up. And especially it affects children in the womb and small children whose brains are developing. If you expose them to mercury, it really has a devastating effect. And there's this famous photograph, like I say, called Tomoko and Mother in Bath. It's a black and white photo of a mother giving her poor daughter this bath, and her daughter has been basically her brain was destroyed by mercury. To the point where like her hands were all curled up and her legs are just like sticks, and she's got these the vacant staring eyes because mercury is one of the worst pollutants that we have on Earth. And so what the scientists in Alaska found is that the amount being released into the Yukon River is much higher than they had estimated. In fact, what they found is that it's 86 to 130 kilograms per square kilometer, which is a lot. And so this mercury gets concentrated in the fish. And so just like the poor Japanese, who, by the way, after this photo went all over the world, it was one of the early things that became viral. It was kind of a pre-meme. Japan was so shamed by this image of the people. And, of course, Tomoko wasn't alone. There were thousands of kids who were getting affected by this mercury. Japan was actually shamed into passing regulations to eliminate mercury dumping into the ocean.
Good. Good.
which, has saved, since then, it's literally saved millions of children from a horrible fate. Unfortunately, the indigenous people in the north are being exposed, because this isn't just happening in the Yukon and Alaska. It's happening everywhere there's permafrost. And the effects are being seen. And so, for example, in Canada, there's a Indian reserve called the Grassy Narrows First Nation that's located in Ontario. And they did a study that shows there's a direct link between the amount of mercury that the children were exposed to, and they found this by looking at the amount in the umbilical cord when the children were born. And so there was literally a direct link between the amount of mercury they had and the number of them that committed suicide. Because if you've damaged your neurological system, you're more likely to fall into depression and have emotional and behavioral problems and commit suicide. And so, in fact, they found that at that Grassy Narrows First Nation, young people committed suicide at 3 times the rate of other First Nations. And so this just reminds me that there's a lot of sort of subclinical effects of things like subtle effects of things like mercury pollution. I mean,
Because it probably does a number on your ability to cope with a kind of emotional pressures.
it absolutely does.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is why it's so horrible, which is why we need to keep it out of the environment, which is why we got to stop the permafrost from thawing,
Right,
just
right.
yet another reason. But, you don't have to get all the way to the state that Tomoko was in to suffer from things like mercury pollution. And so, we just need to regulate it, folks. So we've known this. And so if somebody tells you all we need to do is get rid of environmental regulations and then the economy will be great, no, because people dying and people committing suicide is also very bad for the economy. So, all right. So anyway, got to get to a more positive story. Giraffes. This was a email from the Center for Biological Diversity. Giraffes have received endangered species protection. Yay!
Excellent.
Well, actually, they're up for consideration for endangered species protection
Okay.
by the U.S. Forest and Wildlife Service.
Still good.
Still good. This story was 11/20, and
Wait a minute, the U.S. Forest and Wildlife Service?
yes,
We don't
because
have giraffes.
we don't have giraffes, but
Wait a minute.
we are the world's leader in importing giraffe parts and pieces.
Oh, we need to stop that.
Yeah,
giraffes needs their parts.
We do, right, yeah. The U.S., more than anybody else, imports rugs made from giraffe skin. For some reason, people like to have the heads like mounted on walls and stuff. And
But if you get a dog, it will be all nice and soft and silky and warm like fur, and you just put it on top of you when you lie on the sofa.
so you're advocating that as opposed to having like a giraffe head on your wall.
I mean, yeah,
Okay, all right.
they're attractive and they
Yeah.
feel nice. And they feel even nicer because they're warm too. They have a heating element when they're still alive.
yeah. So there's less than
Live animals are good.
live animals are good.
Yes.
There's less than 70,000 giraffes left on the planet. They've dropped 40%.
You can't have a pet giraffe in your house, though.
No.
Really not.
Don't even try.
No.
Yeah. So the population
giraffes.
dropped 40% in the last since the 1980s. Like
Guess
I
what?
say-
They take a great photograph, though.
so go to Africa and see one.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Or just have a big poster of a giraffe with those big eyes with a big fringy eyelashes. Gorgeous, gorgeous.
Sounds good. So the Center for Biological Diversity and other organizations had petitioned for this protection status back in 2017, and the Forest Service had a deadline. They were supposed to have responded to this petition by 2018, but under that administration, that once and future administration, they just ignored the law and didn't respond to the petition. So they sued again. Center for Biological Diversity sued again in 2021. And so the result of that suit is that the Forest Service has finally opened it up. We are now in the 90-day comment period. And so if we can get through that with enough people saying, yes, we want giraffes in the future, then they should receive protection, in which case they can start putting restrictions on importing giraffe parts and pieces because poaching is one of the main things that is destroying the giraffe population. So that's good news for the giraffes. If they get that protection, that will have a real effect on their population numbers. Okay, the next thing, which may or may not have any kind of real effect, is this COP29 is now over. It's history. And this was supposed to be the quote-unquote finance COP. And so that's kind of what all the news stories have focused on. There was one in Reuters on November 24th. Developing nations blast $300 billion COP29 climate deal as insufficient. And essentially what happened is that the developed nations have agreed to start paying the poorer nations of the world $300 billion a year by 2035, which is, actually after the event horizon when society may well collapse because of the global warming. But the developing nations were like, well, this is we need at least $1 trillion, not $300 billion. But there was also half the countries walked out of the middle of the negotiations on Saturday. And part of the reason a lot of them are saying, well, look, this focus on just money this year is wrong. What we should have been focusing on this year is actually reducing CO2, like creating hard targets, because the whole wonderful thing they claimed about last year's COP was that they finally admitted they needed to phase out fossil fuels. So, half the countries in the world were like, well, then this COP should have been, how are we going to phase it out? When are we going to reduce it, and by how much? And instead it got all talking about money. And this money is both for climate mitigation, that is changing over to non-carbon sources of energy, but it's also about resiliency, which often that means like dikes and dams and things, which waste a lot of money and a lot of time and doesn't reduce CO2 emissions. But apparently,
endless arms race.
yeah, but apparently the Saudis are the ones who blocked any discussion of actual reduction of CO2 emissions. But it is important to note that they are correct that $300 billion is much too low a number, because just this year alone, the world has suffered $125 billion in storm damage. And so, $300 billion is like, by 2035, the damages are predicted to be so much worse that wouldn't even be keeping up with the damage, let alone getting us towards let alone improving things. So nobody was expecting much from this COP, and we didn't get much.
Good.
So just a couple more stories. This one, there was an update on a story. The best coverage of this story was Ohio Capital Journal. Back in July 18th, 2024, they had a story called "Upcoming Supreme Court Decisions Could Make It Even Harder to Develop Solar Power." And what the situation is, there were two solar power companies that were trying to site something. And so they went through the whole Ohio Power Siting Board process, which takes years and millions of dollars. And the Ohio Power Siting Board is supposed to use 8 criteria to decide whether or not to approve a project. And that includes things like need, nature of the environmental impact, does this have the minimum impact, is it consistent with plans, and does it serve the public interest, convenience, and necessity? And what the Power Siting Board did was these solar projects met all the requirements, except the Power Siting Board said, well, there's a lot of political opposition to it, so we're going to say no. And so the solar companies are saying that the Power Siting Board has a responsibility not just to say, is there opposition, but to look at what the opposition is based on and see if there's any truth to what the opposition is based on. So, for example, there could be a rumor around saying that solar panels will cause your kids to have antenna growing out of their head, and so you could use a falsehood like that to gin up a lot of political opposition, Because who wants kids with antennas growing out of their head, right?
Because
So-
it can be hard to buy hats, unless it's standardized so they're all the antenna are in the same place.
yeah, all kinds
Yeah.
of disruptions to
Yeah.
society, but no truth at all to the rumor. And so
Darn it.
that's that's the kind of thing that these opposition to these solar projects was based on. They have all kinds of disinformation saying that they leak toxic chemicals into the air, and that that the reflections cause forest fires, and all kinds of crazy stuff that just isn't true. And so these companies are arguing that political opposition itself, since this opposition served the politicians, they managed to get elected by fighting solar projects. But does political opposition serve the public interest, convenience, or necessity? And so the big update on this story is that the Supreme Court has set the date for the decision. They're going to decide on February 13th, 2025. Okay, we're running out of time, and I want to do the last thing in our on our anniversary show, a House Bill 6 update.
It just won't die.
It's just, the story we've been following since the beginning. And that Ohio Capitol Journal, November 18th, quote, attorney ex-Ohio Speaker Larry Householder using Trump connections to try to get out of prison. Basically, Larry Householder went to prison for corruption, taking $61 million in bribes from First Energy. And now Trump is saying, hey, buddy, hey, Trump, just pardon me. And, this is a scandal we've been following from the beginning. It's got 2 convictions, Householder and Matt Borges, 2 suicides, Sam Radazzo and Ned Clark. He was guilty. It's proven in court. But he just wants to be pardoned because he's a friend of Trump's. That is so swampy. Environmentalists like swamps when we're talking about physical, real swamps, but we hate them when we're talking about political swamps. And you literally can't get more swampy than pardoning somebody like Larry
Which
Householder.
Washington used to be a real swamp, by the way. That's why the origin of the term drained swamp.
Yeah. All right. So let's hope Trump doesn't do that, but I don't know. Odds are not good. All right. That's it for this 300th episode, Thanksgiving episode. Very special. Thank you all so much. Thanks for being a tech. And this is Joe DeBauer signing off.
And Rebecca Wood.
I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more 3-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No